Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, the first Friday of the year. What you see here is a chart that I prepared for my uh, video class. That's available online or from someplace on the creation of a Jupiter talisman, and it's a general lecture, but it's also an illustration uh, to a book project that I'm working on right now. Uh, this is a chart, of at least one version of the hierarchy uh, coming from the singularity, the God source itself, that breaks itself up into what we call the planetary spheres, layers of heaven, and each of those have a have a God name that represents 1/7, if you will, of the totality of the singularity, sort of a specialized facet that is one's Saturnian in nature and Jupiterian and Martial and solar and venereal and mercurial and lunar. And each one of those divine name facets has has a general, has a like an army general working for them. Uh, and in this case, it's Saturn's case. Saturn's God name, Yehovah Elohim, uh, has an archangel that just generally rules all the lesser, more specific angels with more specific duties. But he's the head honcho, Tzafkael. And Tzafkael has I guess, a captain working working under it, and that's Chasael. And Chasael has an intelligence officer that does even more specific things. That would be Agael. And down at the bottom, with the private that actually gets down and does the dirty, I don't want to say dirty work, but I guess the dirty work, Saturnian dirty work. Uh, and that's the one that you can get a hold of to do practical things for you, or to attune yourself to those vibes. But in order for you to get the attention of Zazel down there, you have to remind Zazel that you know that his boss's name is Agael. And you have to make sure that Agael and Zazel know that you know that the chief operating officer there is Casael. And if they you feel free to drop their name to make sure they know that you know the score of who their boss is, and that you absolutely know they're under the general control of Safkael, and that you know that they're working for Yehovah Elohim. And so, in other words, Zazel is not going to give you any particular respect until you start name dropping his boss and his boss's boss and his boss's bosses. And the fact that you, as a reflection of the source, really has the ultimate right, if you will, or uh, power to drop all those names and to pull all those strings. Why am I telling you this? It's in regard to making talismans. Now, why do you make talismans? While you're making them and while you're doing them, you may think that you have a reason to do it. Oh, I want to attract love for Venus, or oh, I want to, I want books, information, education, Mercury. I want to enhance my face forward in the world. So the sun. So, oh, I want to be more introspective. I want my meditations, my silent meditations, to bear fruit. It might be lunar or Saturnian. Or I'm going to need to duke it out on one level or another with some issue in my life. Well, that'd be Mars. Okay, you get what I'm talking about. And you make a talisman, and it sort of focuses your mind and everything else. And you name drop all these guys and draw their specific Kabbalistic sigils and signatures, and you sort of focus your attention. But what the do they actually do? Do you shove them in your shoe and carry them around? Well, some people do. But I'm here to tell you that you will never know exactly what they do. And the fact that you've done it is more or less the ends of the situation. I'm going to describe to you something that happened 50 years ago uh, with my creation of a full set of planetary talismans. Okay, this is one of the first magical acts that I ever did, besides just reading about stuff. And I couldn't tell you exactly what any of it did for me. But I do know one thing, that my life has been very interesting for the last 50 years. Now, I can't say that those talismans were responsible for making my life interesting, because I don't need to say that I think there was a quid pro quo, or there was a cause and an effect. Doesn't matter. Nobody can prove any of that. My life's been what my life has been. And I really consider myself a damn lucky magician. And I really think that my life for the last 50 years has been quite a magical adventure. Can I blame it on that talismanic series of magical operations? No, but I can't even suggest that it wasn't. Does that make sense? That's the same kind of the same thing that, well, if you're such a big magician, why aren't you rich? Well, you don't know how much of a bum I could really be. I'm a roaring success. So, one of the reasons, another thing that you do that you don't know why you're doing it, and you'll never know exactly why you're doing it, is the keeping a magical record or a magical diary, especially during the time period where you're formulating your self-identity as a magician. Now, obviously, you as you're keeping the diary, it's a very artificial thing. Who knows whose ear you're writing for, and you lie to yourself, and you're pretentious, and you half the time you're saying, "Oh, this is going to look good in the future if I ever read this." But even that, even the memory of that's what the situation was, is immeasurably helpful. So, so I my first magical act was actually this before the OTO, before I was into seriously into Crowley or any of that. This is just before that, maybe 9 months before that. Painful as it has been reviewing my magical records, it's afforded me the opportunity to chart the general trajectory and momentum of my spiritual evolution. I've even been able, in several instances, to pinpoint the exact minute of my magical efforts when uh, my magical efforts have actually caused change to occur in conformity with my will. Times that have dramatically changed my life and the lives of others. In fact, at this very moment, you are reading the words on this page as the result of a magical operation I set into motion. Well, now it's 49 years ago. As a matter of fact, it was 49 years ago today, and I wrote this on July the 11th. Okay. In the autumn of 1974, I was enmeshed in what I will politely describe as a turning point in my life. I was 26 years old, married, with a 2-year-old son. I was desperately trying to wean myself from a very unhealthy career as a musician and struggling to bring some semblance of stability and direction to my life. And believe me, my diaries were mostly filled with the agonies of that transition period in our lives. Several years prior to this, to address an intense spiritual hunger, I entered the initiatory world of the Western Mysteries, specifically the degree work of the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, and the builders of the Additum, BOTA. As fascinating as my studies were, they were just that, studies. My life needed changing. I didn't want to just study. I wanted to perform magic. But what kind of magic? I had heard some pretty scary things about the evils of magic. So I was desperate to find a safe place to start. Sound familiar? In January of 1975, in an old and stuffy little occult bookstore in North Long Beach, I purchased How to Make and Use Talismans by Israel Regardie. I trusted Regardie, having read several of his classic magical texts. This little book, however, was different. It actually had it was a how-to book of practical magic. Now, How to Make and Use Talismans is still available in, I guess you'd say, harmlessly pirated editions. I wrote these words for the projected Wiser reprint of it, which never manifested. But this would have been part of my introduction to the Wiser How to Make and Use Talismans. And you can find it right here in Allow Me to Introduce. Okay. Regardie's sane and straightforward explanation of the fundamentals of talismanic magic instantly dispelled my superstitious doubts. His generous offering of charts, diagrams, and illustrations, which I promptly copied and pasted into my magical diary, made it a treasure trove of easy-to-use information. I couldn't wait to graduate from student to practitioner. After reading it through several times, I knew exactly where I needed to begin. In Chapter 2 of How to Make and Use Talismans, Regarde suggests that planetary talismans can be helpful in overcoming unfavorable aspects that might be afflicting one's astrological chart. What a great idea. I knew I had difficult aspects in my natal chart, so I contacted my brother Mark, the astrologer, to see which planet could use a little extra help. All of them, he coldly informed me. But because it rules my chart, he suggested I first try to make friends with the moon. With Regarde's little book as my guide, I started gathering symbols for a lunar talisman on January 23rd, and this is 1975, at midnight on the 27th. Oh, excuse me, January 23rd. At midnight on the 27th, after anointing it, my little talisman, after anointing it with drops of dew that formed in the moonlight, falling or appearing on my 1952 Chrysler Windsor, I consecrated the talisman with as much ceremony as I was capable of devising. My moon talisman was the most beautiful thing I had ever made. It was a double circle model made of cardstock. I extracted the sigils of the lunar spirit and intelligence from the chimea in the, or magical square, 9 by 9 for the moon. Drew them in silver paint against a field of deep violet drawing ink on the front and back of one of the circles. On the other circle, I painted a silver image of the elephant god Ganesha. That's how far back Ganesha and I go. To whom the moon is sacred. On one side, and on the other side, the appropriate planetary geomantic symbols. Around one perimeter, I wrote in Hebrew the divine and angelic names, and that would be all of those guys. Starting with, see the moon, Shaddai El-Kai, Gabriel, and another Gabriel, go figure. And then that was a tough one. That's a big, long name. And Chesmodai. Okay. Around one perimeter, I wrote in Hebrew the divine and angelic names. And on the reverse side, reverse part, the 72nd Psalm. Regarding says a versicle of some kind is always appropriate for a talisman. So I got out the little New Testament and Psalms that a hungover, drunken truck driver gave me at a truck stop in Grand Island, Nebraska, when me and my band stopped there for breakfast. You long hairs deserver, you better read this. And he gave me this Bible. I still have it. That was probably 1964. Anyway, I digress. The 72nd Psalm is abundance of peace as long as the moon endureth. When it was finished, I lovingly slipped it inside a linen bag I had sewn with violet thread. On the flap, I embroidered a silver crescent moon. I was very proud of myself. But I still didn't feel like much of a magician. I did carry it around for a few days and felt tremendously empowered, but empowered to do what? I don't know. I wasn't sure what I should do next. The answer came, as so many important answers do, while I was taking a shower. I'd make all of the planetary talismans. For the next 4 months, with the help of Regardie's How to Make and Use Talismans and using my ever-improving artistic and magical skills, I created and consecrated a full set of 7 planetary talismans. Each one was more beautiful and worshipful than its predecessor. The order in which I created them was dictated by the severity of the planetary afflictions in my natal chart. I sort of prioritize the thorns in my flesh. I consecrated the Mars talisman on February 12th. By then, I had taught myself the supreme invoking ritual of the pentagram and hexagram, which from then on became part of my consecration rituals. Jupiter was the next on February 27th, Constance's birthday, followed by Venus 1 month later. The Venus talisman evoked the most remarkable reactions. My dreams were filled with vividly erotic encounters, such as I had not experienced since adolescence. They continued until April 4th, when I consecrated my talisman of Mercury, when my dreams turned anxious and confusing. Oh well. I started the Saturn talisman on May 10th and consecrated it at midnight on the 13th. The next day, I started to collect the symbols for my 7th and last planetary talisman, the Sun. It took 10 days to complete. I consecrated it during the lunar eclipse that took place on May 24th. My arsenal of planetary talismans was finally completed. I had no idea that I would have probably been, don't consecrate your solar talisman during an eclipse. And I thought about that, but then I also thought, no, that's the joining of the sun and the moon. And the little slit that's formed on the outside against the sun is sort of like a black mark of the beast, which is the crescent at the sun, or the sun and the crescent moon conjoin. Anyway, but what did I know? Throughout this entire talisman making period and the months that followed, life at the DuQuette house was a litany of chaos, frustration, and despair. In an attempt to make money doing something other than singing in saloons, I accepted a house painting job and we moved to the San Gabriel Valley, Laverne. As it turned out, I would never be paid for my admittedly inept labor, and we found ourselves stranded in the smoggiest town in California with no job and no money. What do your talismans do? Yeah, they ruin your life. On July 11th, that's my birthday, that's 1975, dawned with the prospect of the worst birthday of my life. About 11:15 in the morning, I shut myself in my bedroom temple. I lit a candle and put it on my altar top. I half-heartedly performed the banishing rituals of the pentagram and hexagram and sat down and tried to meditate. I couldn't. To cheer myself up, I removed my cherished talismans from their bags and lingered on every detail of their splendor. I turned them in my fingers. I whispered the words of power, the names of the gods and angels and spirits inscribed on each one of them. Finally, as if to bring order to my otherwise unordered universe, I placed the sun in the center of the altar top and surrounded it with the 6 remaining planets in their proper hexagram positions. They were so beautiful, so perfect. For the moment, I didn't know how to feel. I was alternately depressed and elated. Depressed that these talismans were the only thing perfect in my life, and elated that something was perfect in my life. I looked at the clock. It was almost noon and time to rejoin Constance and Jean-Paul for birthday cake. They were both giggling in the kitchen. Their laughter made me giggle too. And in a cliche epiphany worthy of a Frank Capra film, It's a Wonderful Life, I realized that there were lots of perfect things in my life. My melancholy lifted, and I credited the talismans for my change of mood. As I gazed at them there on the altar top, I realized that they'd never be more beautiful or meaningful to me than they were at that moment. In just a few weeks, their colors would start to fade, the inks would crack, the edges wear. In a few years, I'd probably lose some of them, and those that remained would eventually shrivel into crumbling corpses. How could I preserve them forever just like this, at the zenith of their strength, in an environment where their beauty would never be effaced, a place where their power would never be diminished? There was only one answer, and it returned to me on the same wavelength that carried my question. Same thought wavelength. These talismans were no good to me sitting on my altar top or tucked away in their sterile little bags. They would have to literally become part of me. No, more than that, I must use their magic to make me someone else, someone new. I must reabsorb my precious planetary children and plant them in the womb of my own soul. I must impregnate myself with their magical potency, and by doing so beget upon myself a new self. One by one, I joyously plunged the 7 talismans into the magic fire of the altar candle and inhaled their light and heat as the frail husks of paper and ink were reduced to a white, clean ash. It was noon on July 11th, 1975, the first moment of my life as a magician. And on November 15th, the following year, 1975, the same year, so July 11th to November 15th. And November 15th, I took my Minerval initiation at the hands of Grady L. McMurtry and Phyllis Seckler in Dublin, California, and started my formal thelemic OTO-AA magical career. And I had no idea that that was in the future. Do talismans work? Well, yeah, they work. But you probably won't be able to actually predict just how they work. Well, anyway, that's it for today. Tomorrow is Saturday morning cartoons. Uh, I hope I have something interesting for you to think about tomorrow. But until then, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.